Amanda, thank you for coming on the podcast. I feel like we could have recorded some of that, which we, just started with, and it was so natural, and I'm so grateful for you being here, and I'm excited to just have a great conversation today.
Me too. I'm super excited for this.
So, most likely to brighten your day. That was your high school award?
It was, yeah.
Tell me about that. Why did you get that award?
That is so funny. What a fun question. You probably had these. I think every school calls them something different. Like my school called them superlatives in high school. Mm-hmm. So we just had a lot of different kooky ones. Like there was most well rested for people who slept a lot in class, and things like that. I don't really know how I got that award. I guess I am a ray of sunshine. No, but I think it was just I'm a pretty upbeat person. Even if I'm having a bad day, I can usually find something to laugh at, even if it's a self-deprecating joke. Because I don't know, I kind of think the more you can laugh at, having a bad time or turning a bad moment into a funny one or seeing the humor in a situation, I think it's an important way to kind of go about life, right? Like, don't take yourself too seriously. Maybe don't take a situation too seriously. And I kind of just think the sooner you can laugh at something, the sooner you can get over it and move on.
Definitely. And I'm curious if there have been any moments in your life when you didn't feel like that ray of sunshine. And if so, what do you do about it if it was an elongated period of time, more than just like a day?
Yeah.
Like let's say it was a week or a month.
Yeah. It's tough. I don't think this would surprise anybody, but there are definitely moments throughout the pandemic where it was hard to stay upbeat. And for any number of reasons, right? Everyone's dealing with different stuff, whether it is, oh my gosh, there's so much to process, right? Sometimes there's survivor's guilt of realizing, oh, I'm a lot luckier than a lot of people, but I'm still having a bad day and I don't feel like I'm allowed to. That's hard to deal with, right? Sometimes it's also just, but sometimes it's also a level of burnout, right? Like, throughout the pandemic, my husband and I kept our toddler son at home and without having childcare. So we were just tag teaming on both working and taking care of our son full time, which, made for a really long day. And so there were certainly streaks of time where, it was like I was working 16-hour days, including like work, and then childcare, and then just taking care of my family, like cleaning, cooking, that kind of stuff that everyone deals with, but was doing this days on end, and it was tough. So how I got myself out of it, I think, was one, giving myself some time to be able to complain to some friends or family, right? Like just being able to say, gosh, today was awful. These things happened. But also not doing this too much. I think that's really important, right? Because I think once you get into complain mode, it can be easy to stay there and then just complain to anybody who will listen. But that's bad. I think you need to figure out how to like vent a little bit and then let it go. Like truly vent, right? Now, I think there's a difference between venting and prolonging the pain by keeping it alive, by continuing to talk about it. So there's that.
Yeah.
Venting and then figuring out that action plan to move forward. So it was like, all right, I complained about my day. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to do something to unwind, like, play a video game for a minute or watch a movie, like just something to decompress that is something that I would not normally do throughout the day. And then trying to get a good night's sleep and then doing it again the next day.
Yeah. Why do you think that it helps us to talk about our problems? It's kind of like a really simple question, but it's so true that like when people talk to a therapist or when people just vent out their problems, sometimes it leaves them lighter. Why do you think that is?
I think we all at some point want to feel heard or understood. So I think part of it is just feeling seen, having your feelings validated. But I think the other piece too is when you vent to someone, you're saying the things out loud. So you're forced to clarify that thought in some way. Like you're externalizing what's in your head, right? Like when you're in your own head and you don't say anything, things get jumbled. You don't articulate properly and it just kind of stays a mess. But when you say it out loud, you're forced to clarify it. Or maybe someone will say, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" And then you have to explain it. And then by the end of it, if nothing else, you at least feel clearer about how you feel about something. Like maybe you're still upset, but maybe you have a better sense of why you're upset. And I think that alone can often help you feel better.
Yeah, it's awareness. And that's something what I love speaking to writers is that it seems like they're so aware of themselves and their emotions and how they're thinking about things because you're forced to do that so often with the page. How has writing given you more awareness?
Yeah. So I've been writing for a very long time, just haven't been publishing that much. Or I just started publishing maybe like in the recent couple years. But in kind of building that writing muscle over many years, I've learned I've learned that it's the best way for me to personally to communicate. Like usually if I have something, big that I'm dealing with, writing it out first helps me clarify the thinking, or it helps me clarify some of the roadblocks where maybe I don't know the actual solution moving forward, but I can at least highlight the things that are giving me pause. And then I can talk about those with like a manager or my partner or a friend, right? So there's that. But I think writing, whether or not you publish, I still think whether or not you publish and whether or not you self-identify as a writer is the best way to clarify what you're thinking and to process some of the emotions that you maybe aren't ready yet to process.
Could you give an example of how writing has helped you in a specific situation?
Yeah. So one tool that I really like is called 750words.com. It's like a blogging platform, but the idea is not to publish the actual work. It's for the platform to kind of, I think it uses some AI tools, right, to kind of gauge sentiment of what you're saying. So it might run an analysis, or it does run an analysis. And then afterwards it might say like maybe your feelings overall were mostly negative. Maybe it sounds like you're talking about work or things like that where maybe you already know that because you're the one writing it. But even if it's an AI tool, it's helpful for something else that's not you to externalize some of those things so that you can look at it and go, that's true. Like this thing in my relationship is bothering me. Like it is bothering me more than I thought that it was. But a recent way that writing has helped me, and this is very recent, is right now I'm building out a content marketing course, a cohort-based course that I'm running through Maven. And content marketing is a subset of marketing that I've been doing for like 8 or 9 years now. So I know it really well. But sometimes there are things that you know really well that if someone asks you about, you don't know where to start, right? Because you know a lot of it, right? You're like, do I start from how much context do you have? How much should I tell you? Do I start at the beginning or do I start in the middle? So in building out this course, what I did was I wrote out many drafts of what I thought the ideal syllabus or course outline would look like. And then I would write it out and then I would put it down for several hours or for a day just to like kind of forget about it. And then I would come back to it with a mindset of, if I'm talking to my friend about content marketing, and I'm assuming this friend has some marketing experience, what are the things that I would tell them that they really need to know in 4 lessons? So that has really helped me because that's helped me move around some of the modules, helps me think about kind of what is the overall arc of that person's journey throughout this course. So I think I'm getting closer to finalizing the syllabus, but yeah.
What was the moment when you said, oh, I really want to put out a content marketing course?
So the first cohort-based course that I did was, I think it was with you. It was Rite of Passage
Oh
Yeah, I think
yeah, right.
this time last year, but you and I were never in any of the breakout sessions. Like we just happened to not be in the breakouts together.
Yeah.
But I remembered you in the I think the first day of the course or second day. But yeah, so that was the first experience that I had with a cohort-based course, and I really liked it. I mean, it was a terrific experience. Of course, David Perella is amazing, and like only he can work a Zoom room the way he does, right? He's so like energetic and fun to watch, and it feels like a warm hug, right? Just talking to him.
Definitely.
So that was a great experience. And then I did a couple of other cohort-based courses and some self-paced courses. And then I was realizing over the past year that well, as I was growing my Twitter following and sharing my learnings on content and on marketing, that I was getting a lot of the same questions from people on like, how do you get started? Or what do I do with this piece of content? Or I already have this company blog. What do I do next? Like, what is the next phase of my content strategy? So in getting a lot of these questions, I realized, oh, if I do a course on this, which theoretically should be easy for me to create because I've been doing this for a long time, then maybe I can answer a lot of these questions at scale and in a way that's a lot more thoughtful and more dedicated. So, yeah.
What is content marketing to you?
Yeah. To me, content marketing, I mean, of course, personal bias. I've been doing this for years. So I feel like content marketing should be the base of everyone's marketing strategy, right? I think content is, it's more than PR and it's more than, SEO. It's how do you articulate the value proposition of your business in a way that is ongoing and that changes over time, or that's dynamic enough to where you can elevate it along with trends or news or how your business changes in the broader landscape. I think content is how you weave that narrative.
It's fascinating because it's like how I think about content is that it's changing all the time. For example, a podcast. This podcast is content, right? But if you think about 5 years ago, maybe you would have or wouldn't have recommended someone to start a podcast. And it's like a TikTok account. Maybe you would have told someone to start Musically 5 years ago. Maybe today you're like, this is way more important. So like, how do you think about how you could be creating this course and then things could change as you're developing it and how content is going to change? How do you think about that dynamic of change with something that is being created by you? That's
a really good question. So as I'm building the course, so I'm thinking it's going to be a 4-day course across 2 weeks. So which will mean that it'll have these 4 sessions will be live sessions. And then we'll also have some assignments throughout this course. And I'll have a couple of pre-recorded short videos for additional content, right? Or for additional learnings on certain content channels. So the way I'm seeing this is the 4 main sessions are the sessions that are more strategic, that it's more like, here are the overall principles that are lasting, that can apply to many content channels, regardless of how maybe algorithms change or how personal preferences change. And then the shorter videos that I will record will include some of the best practices for something like, what does it take to write compelling content on LinkedIn today? Like that might change, right? Like something like that, that's specific enough that could be different in 6 months. So I'm comfortable with that being a short video. And then maybe when I rerun the cohort in a couple months, I'll have to update that video. But my hope is that the main content, the 4 sessions, will kind of stand the test of time, at least for the foreseeable couple years.
yeah, that definitely makes sense because the pillars will hopefully stay the same, but the specific ways, the tactics are going to be more ever changing. And it's like, if you know the pillars, then you probably can apply them to whatever direction you want to go in. You mentioned the algorithm before, and I'm curious from your perspective, how being a content creator yourself, how you look at the algorithm, meaning it's crazy because it controls so much of our thinking and controls so much of the things we see and the inputs we take in, how do you make sure that the algorithm doesn't suck you in endlessly when you get endless notifications, and how you're able to live with the choices you make?
Yeah. I think you have to make a conscious effort to not look at it sometimes. I'll admit it's hard, right? Especially like if you feel like if you've posted something that you see is gaining traction, it's hard not to refresh and be like, oh, cool, it's resonating with people. And like that is cool when that happens, right? But it's not, I think at the same time you have to remind yourself it's just a website, like it's just a social platform. Like you got to put it down. I think the way I see it, the way that I try to see it is trying to have fun with it and not trying to get sucked in. Like, and by fun, I mean like, what are the things that I can learn from this today? Like okay, this post or this thread is doing really well. I wonder why. And then kind of leading into what you can learn from that. And then when you have stuff that doesn't perform well, which happens to all of us, right? It's trying not to take that personally, where it's, oh, you know what? I guess I didn't resonate because maybe the hook that I wrote was maybe it was hard to understand, or maybe it just wasn't that interesting. And I thought it was a lot more interesting than it actually was. And like, that's okay. So I think just trying to, just making a conscious effort to get out of it and to not look at it sometimes. I think that's kind of the main thing.
Yeah, it's hard because social media is such an advantage and it's such a disadvantage if it goes in that direction of too much use. And it's a weird balancing act. And I'm curious, like, do you set timers for yourself? How do you know when enough is enough?
Oh, yeah. I don't set timers. I think I just more so schedule it around to-dos. So it's sort of like, okay, these are the 3 big work priorities I have today. I'm not going to look at social media until I cross off at least one of them. And then and then think it's important to take breaks, right? So after I finish an important task, I'll give myself a break and I'll, maybe look at Twitter or something. So that helps. And then also just, things like, okay, if I'm cooking dinner, right, then like that's a pretty focused task. And that's going to be something where I'm like, okay, don't look at Twitter right now. Like you're busy with this. I think just kind of training yourself to focus on one thing at a time. And I think it's really hard for any of us to do. And regardless of social media, right? Training yourself to focus on one task at a time will help you just be more impactful in whatever it is that you're doing. Like, cooking dinner, right? If you're doing it without really paying attention, you might burn something, right? You might burn your hand. You might burn the food. But yeah.
You mentioned dinner, and I have a real bone to pick with you, Amanda, because I cannot believe that you would choose regular fries over sweet potato fries. Then you're a big foodie. You're deep into the food world. How'd you get obsessed with food? I think that's something probably a lot of people who just follow you on Twitter don't know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this question. You're so good, Danny. How did I get obsessed with food? This is a fun question because I honestly have never thought about this, because you don't think about the things you're really, really into because they're just a part of you. I think I get bored kind of easily. So even as a kid, like I would get obsessed with like certain sandwiches or certain things. I'd be like, I only want this. And I would eat that every day for like a month. But then after that, it was like, ew, I never want this again. So like some of those, like for some reason when I was a kid, I was really obsessed with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise sandwiches, but nothing else in it. Like they're like my family was like, don't you want bacon in it? And I was like, no, that's too much. This is perfect for me. And they're like, you're so weird. So my mom would make me that for lunch every day. And then one day I was like, why? I don't want this. Like I want peanut butter and banana that's disgusting. We're not doing this again. So I think, so part of it is that, and that's kind of how I am today. Like there are certain meals that I make. Like there's one meal that I made. You might like this, Danny. It was roasted sweet potatoes, eggs, and some green vegetable. Like that was like my go-to dinner for when I didn't know what to make. And it was just, I need something healthy. I think you'd like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like solid meal. And I made that constantly for like a year. And I haven't made it in like 5 years. So I think that's like a weird combination of like getting obsessed with these really little things and then getting sick of it and then doing an about face and doing something different. So I think that just that alone has kind of forced me to be really into food, because if that's my attitude, I have to keep changing it and I have to keep learning.
It's fascinating because at some point you say to yourself, I want to make this a career. I want this to be my whole life. And you might even still think in the back of your head, I'm going to be a food blogger one day, or I'm going to dominate the food channel and make my own food channel on YouTube. Like, I know that's probably in the back of your head. Like, what made you be like, okay, I love this? There's one thing to love it and have it be a part of you. There's another for you to say, I want this to be my entire life. Yeah. And I think your cousin played some role in this as well.
Oh my gosh, how do you know all this? You're amazing. Yeah. I mean, I was in a journalism career for a couple years, and the way I always say it is, it wasn't boring. I got boring for the job because I realized like I wasn't doing what I needed to do to get to the next step because I didn't want to do it. So then I realized, okay, I need to change something. And then at the time I learned that Le Cordon Bleu had this kind of newer program that was geared towards people who worked full time. So I thought, oh, cool, I can do that. Oh, and it was also half the cost of the normal tuition. So I was like, oh, it's not that expensive. I can do this while I have my job, so I don't have to like quit and figure it out. I can do both. So I was doing that. And then while I was in school, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a food writer. Like I'm going to be like a Michelin star reviewer. Like I just thought I was going to be a good food writer, and I would be able to establish some clout by having gone to culinary school. But I didn't bother doing any research on this industry. That was naive, right? And so as I got into it and started applying for food writing jobs, I saw pretty quickly that there weren't that many. So I think I went from, I decided arbitrarily that I'm going to do this thing as a career without even doing the due diligence of learning about the industry at large. Silly. But then the good thing about this was that it helped me figure out a content marketing career. Like at the time, I didn't really know what content marketing was, but I knew that it had to do with creating content and, writing for a blog. And I was like, oh, I know how to do all that. So I think what I realized was, I can use my existing skills for food stuff. Like, okay, I can parlay this into something else. So I did that, and then kind of quickly got into a food content marketing career at NatureBox, a subscription snack company. And at the time, I mean, they hired me to make up recipes using the snacks and blog about it, which is amazing, right? That was kind of the dream job. And I couldn't believe how lucky I was, right? So I was in it and I was doing the job. And I think like with most things, and I think what most people maybe do or do not want to admit, once you get that thing, you might realize either it wasn't what it cracked up to be, or maybe you weren't what you cracked up to be, right? Like you realize, this wasn't, like maybe this is what I wanted, but maybe I want something else. So I was really happy, in that job, in that career, and like doing what I was doing. But I think what I also realized pretty quickly was, I don't actually need to work in food to be happy. Like I think what I actually wanted was to do marketing, and I didn't know it. And, have kept up with my hobbies of cooking and like home bartending and, just learning about foods, and realize like, because I'm passionate about that, I'm always going to do that. Like, that's always going to be part of my life. And I don't have to make that my career.
That's fascinating. And when you think about, you get particular foods that you love, and you go from, you have that food religiously for a set amount of time, then you move on to something else. Do you think that way about careers too, or jobs, where you're like, okay, I love it and I'm obsessed, and then I go to something else? Because when you speak, I'm hearing myself in that I get obsessed with something and then I go on to the next thing, and then I kind of feel upset about myself for like, why'd you get so excited about that job if it's not for you, but it could have been for you at a particular time? So does any of that make sense to you?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I've done that for sure. Like, I think,
Me too.
Like when I was at Fitbit for quite a while. I think I was there for like 4.5 years or so. And I mean, I was really happy to be there. It was it's absolutely a career highlight to be a part of that kind of company. And it was like huge highlight, right? And I was super grateful to be there. But after a couple of years, I felt that excitement or that obsession starting to wane. But the difference was I didn't have anything to replace it. Like, so when I was in journalism, I wanted to do food. Okay, the food was the thing I was chasing. When I was at Nature Box and doing food, then the next thing I was chasing was I want to work in a bigger marketing team or like a bigger company. And it became that. But then once I got to that, and, was able to achieve a lot with my team, and we were able to do great things, but I didn't have the next step yet. And I think people were asking me like, oh, what's next for you? And I just didn't know. And, in hindsight, I wish that, I say I wish, but I also don't know. I was going to say, I wish that I did something more or different to force myself into figuring out next steps. But at the same time, I don't know what that would have been. So I can't really regret it. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. What would that look like? Like, let's paint the picture where somebody's in a job that they were once happy with and now they're not as happy and they don't know what next steps to take. That's so open-ended because it could be any type of job or anything. But like in your head, what comes to mind when you think about identifying next steps for somebody who was once happy and now they're not?
So something that did help me was talking to a lot of people just about like potential roles at their company, what I should be doing next. But maybe what I would do differently or what I would recommend to people is talking to people who are really passionate about their careers or just happy people who are really happy with where they are and whatever it is they're doing, regardless of whether that's interesting to you. So maybe we could take careers out of the equation. Maybe it's somebody who is a stay-at-home parent and they freaking love it. Like, cool. If you're not in that headspace, maybe you don't relate to it, but it might be helpful to talk to that person to understand why they love it so much. So something like that. I think talking to people who love whatever it is they're doing and trying to understand why, that might help you figure out how you can go about finding your next big passion or your next obsession.
Yeah, I like that. And I try to do that with this podcast, talking to people who are just happy with life and seem to have it together for any given moment. But you mentioned parenting, and I got to ask about the 33-hour labor. What's that about?
Oh my gosh. Labor is gnarly. It really is. So I had a really easy pregnancy, and anyone listening who has had a kid might want to punch me in the face, and that's fair. But I loved being pregnant. Those stock photos of pregnant women with like the flower crown standing in the field. Like I felt like that. Like that was like my vibe. I loved it. Like prior to pregnancy, I liked drinking alcohol. Like I liked going to bars, hanging out with friends. But as soon as I got pregnant, I didn't care. Like I thought that not drinking alcohol was going to be hard, but it wasn't. It was just, I don't do that right now. I'm pregnant, so no. So that was easy. Yeah. And I just loved it. I love the science of it. Like, cool, there's a human growing in my body. That's cool. I like that. So And I was just super positive the whole time. I was feeling good, happy. I worked out every day. Like since I was living in San Francisco, I had a walking commute, and I walked like 10, 12,000 steps every single day. It was easy.
Wow.
Like up until I was like 9 months pregnant. So I was like, I'm going to have such a great labor. It's going to be easy. And it wasn't. It just was a disaster in every way. Like I labored at home because it wasn't too painful for like 14 hours or so, just chilling at home. It was okay. And then my husband and I took an Uber to the hospital. But by that point, I was like, oh no, this is really painful and I'm freaking out. And then from there, like the hospital was full. So I had to just kind of like wait in one of these weird little triage waiting rooms with like sitting on a gurney. And the room was like half the size of your bathroom, probably. It was this weird tiny room. So the vibe sucked. And then at the hospital I was in, so when you're pregnant, they have you create a birth plan. And a birth plan is like your ideal kind of labor. And it include you can, and the idea is to write it out in advance so that you don't have to think about it when you're at the hospital. You can just hand it over and be like, here's my birth plan. And it might include things like my husband will play this Spotify playlist, or I don't know, like fun stuff like that. Or it'll include stuff like the really important medical stuff, like I don't want an epidural, like do not give it to me. Or when the baby is born, hand the baby to me immediately instead of like cleaning up the baby first, right? Like there are just kind of like little things like that you might not know to think about, right? So it was all written out. And one of my things was I didn't want narcotics as a painkiller because, I was worried about potential risk to the baby. So I was in labor, active labor. I did want the epidural, but because they were full, they couldn't give it to me. So I was waiting indefinitely. And because I didn't foresee that, I was like, can I just have the narcotics then? Because I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. They were like, nope, we're not doing that. That's not in your plan.
Wow.
And they just said, and I was so furious, waiting indefinitely. Finally, 4 or 5 hours later, got the epidural, and it was magic. Amazing. People don't talk about that enough, how incredible the epidural is. Like, you just don't feel any pain. It's awesome. Anyway, I'll wrap this up soon. I finally was pushing, and the baby just wasn't coming out. Like, he just wasn't moving. And they were like, we don't know what it is. I was even standing, and I was squatting. I was strong. Like, I was a strong pregnant lady, and I was getting it done. But the baby just wasn't moving. So at the end, I was like, just cut him out of me. So got the C-section, and it was fine. But it was after this, 32 hours or 33 hours of active labor. So it was nuts. My takeaways from that personally are, I think the overall takeaway was that how absurd it is that making babies is literally the thing we've been doing since the beginning of time. Right? It is the oldest thing that we as humans have been doing. And yet it is approached today with so much wonder and magic. When you think about it objectively, it's like, shouldn't this be not that magical? Because this is an old thing. I asked all these questions of my doctors after I gave birth. I was like, well, what went wrong? Why wasn't I able to push my baby? And they were like, you know what? The body is mysterious. It just happens. I'm like, it's not that mysterious. I was like, but I'm not special is the thing. I'm like, nothing crazy happened. I wasn't at risk of anything. There was no actual drama. It was just a weird, thing that happened. So my thinking was, this isn't special. I'm not special. So it's kind of bonkers that we're treating this like this big mystery.
It's a crazy story. What's a common amount of time for a woman to be in labor?
I think average is 10 or 11 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think average pushing time, actually pushing out the baby, is 2 hours or less. I was pushing for 4.5.
It's that's crazy. And you mentioned like having a plan, and I'm sure that's very common, but I'm not at all surprised that you had a plan because everything you do, at least online, is so organized. I'm in shock. You have like a media kit and like you have what you would put in the bio, and you have things you want to talk about on podcasts, and everything's so organized on your website. And I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible that you have that level of organization and detail. And that's why I was so surprised when you were talking about your plants dying, because I was like, how is that possible? You're one of the most organized people I know, at least on the internet. And so I guess my question is like, I'm maybe one of the least organized people. And so what do you recommend for somebody to be more organized? Give me the course. What's the organization course? How does one go about becoming more organized?
That's so funny. See, I think my husband would say I'm not organized. If I forget something, he's like, wow. Oh, figures. You have a terrible system set up for this thing. So if you ever look at like my desktop, it's just filled with screenshots. It's awful.
Wow. Okay.
So there's that.
So maybe it's public facing.
It's public facing. Well, I think the things that I rely on are my calendar. Like I will just put reminders for, even if it's as small as like send an email to this person for this reason, where it's like specific but it's small. I put that on my calendar so then it doesn't get lost. And the other thing is I have a very not complicated note-taking system. Like I'm sure you have a note-taking app which one do you use?
The Notes app.
Oh, okay. So I use that too for like quick stuff that I know, like I'm going to copy and paste this later or like do something with this thing later. But I use Evernote, and I'm sure a lot of the note-taking enthusiasts who are listening are probably like, oh, use Rome, please. But I've been using, I think I'm like Evernote's first paid user. I've been using it for like 10 years.
Wow.
So like all my stuff is there, but my system it's super, super simple. Where I just have a couple of notebooks. One is called Info. The other is Create. The other is The Menu, which is my newsletter and show. And the fourth one is SparkToro, which is my day job. So Info and Create is mainly where I live. Info is like links to things. Maybe it's quotes or excerpts from articles that really resonate with me. I just plop it in there, and I mean, I might put like the title of the article or something, but that's it. It just lives in like separate choppy notes. And then Create is drafts of things that I'm working on, whether it's a blog post, a thread, ideas for tweets, anything like that. The Menu is, drafts of my newsletter, ideas for my YouTube show. And then SparkToro, of course, is just like all the notes I have for work. So Info and Create, that's the main stuff. And I mean, Evernote's search function now is really good, so it's easy for me to find notes. I'll just be like, oh, didn't I start a thread on like, what is it? Like common hooks to use in blog posts. Like, I think I have something like that, and I can just search for the term hooks and it comes up. So having a super painfully simple system, that has helped me because I don't have to think about like, where do the nodes connect or stuff like that.
Interesting. So is that a system you'd recommend? Like somebody set up, like, or is it just I feel like the best systems are the ones that you organically use because you use it often. So is that true from your perspective too?
Yeah. And I've tried a couple of the like, whatever, more professional, I guess, like other note-taking systems that I think are great. I just couldn't adhere to them. So for the system that I have, which is basically like a brain dump, input and then things I want to make, output, and that's it. That helps me because I don't have to think about where things go. I just put them in. It's searchable. It's fine. That's helpful. And then I actually do have a couple of folders for things like medical files, like that, or
smart.
like tax documents, or cards and letters. That's a good one because when you get like cards in the mail, like what do you do with them? I take a picture of them, store it in Evernote, and I throw it away.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that, because I literally just started doing that. I was like, wow, if I just take a picture of this, I can actually get away from the physical item. And it's like, I noticed that when I refreshed on my phone, I was like, wow, that's a nice card. So yeah, that's very interesting that you said that.
Yeah.
Kind of switching gears here. I'd love to talk about hypnotherapy. You say it's like a personalized guided meditation.
Yes.
I love that. I'm so fascinated by it. And I have one that I use to sleep sometimes that works really well. I can't remember off the top of my head. Hopefully I can remember and put it in the show notes. But what do you use hypnotherapy for?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked this, because I don't get to talk about this. And I think you'd really like it. So I meet with a hypnotherapist. Like, we have Zoom sessions together. Yeah. She's awesome. And I think, and like you said that I said, it's personalized guided meditation. So I think it's a really good treatment, or I don't know what to call it. We'll call it treatment. It's a good treatment for when you maybe know some of the things you need to do, or you have some clarity in how to move forward with something or how to think about something, but you're just having some trouble enacting it. So maybe something like, let's say you have certain goals you want to hit and you're just having a hard time focusing and you're procrastinating. And maybe you're procrastinating because you're intimidated by the goals that you have, right? You're like, you have big goals and you're like, I don't know if I can do it. And then you end up procrastinating because of the fear of failing, right? Or the fear of doing or messing up in some way. I think that's a very normal feeling, right? Where I'm sure everybody has deep-seated reasons for having those feelings in their own way. But at the same time, it is clear enough where if you're experiencing that, you know what you got to do. You know you have to focus and like do the thing and just get it done. Maybe chop up the task into tiny pieces. Like you know these things. So for when you feel this way, hypnotherapy can be really helpful. And it's really helped me figure out, like, it's helped me kind of slow down and figure out what I have to do next. Or it's helped me reconcile some of the insecurities that I might have that hold me back at times. Like, what's an example? So a more vulnerable example would be, I'm very much a yes person. Like, I think it started from just, I used to be very much a no person. And my husband pointed out to me, like, you say no to a lot of things. Like, maybe you should embrace things more, or like be more open-minded to certain new experiences. And I was like, I guess that's true. Because my knee-jerk reaction is to hate most things. I'm like, oh, I hate that. I don't want to do that. So I've kind of retrained my brain to say yes, to be like, okay, maybe it's awesome. I should try it. But in doing that, I say yes to too many things. And so there's that. And then there's also this, other feeling of, I'm a people pleaser. Like, I like making friends with people. I like being pleasant. Like, I like having lots of friends, I'm sure you relate to that.
Totally.
So then there's the feeling of when you say yes to too much, like, your time and your mental energy and your physical energy is limited. You can't say yes to everything. So what hypnotherapy has helped me with is it's helped me visualize my boundaries and helped me enact them. So something we did was we like, my hypnotherapist talked me through like imagining what boundaries look like and then describing them to her. And so when I described my boundaries, the thing that surprised me was they were like open fences, like,
wow,
like fences where maybe you would see it like in a farm, right? Like those two posts.
You could jump over it.
Yeah, you could jump over it, right? But they're there,
Yeah.
right? But like the cows can't really like push through, or they wouldn't.
Yeah.
So I think this might sound so silly to someone listening, but it helped me realize that boundaries don't have to be these like super high ironclad fences that are shut all the time. It could just be these little fences that delineate this versus that. And that's okay. And having those boundaries protects you. It protects you. It gives you, and your boundaries can be big. Like, it doesn't mean that you're boxing yourself into this teeny tiny phone booth space. It can still be big. It can still be open. It can still be welcoming of people. But what you are doing is establishing some of the ground rules for how you conduct yourself and for how you let people into your own world.
That was really helpful. How did you go about saying, oh, I'm going to hire a hypnotherapist? Like, did your friend recommend it? Like, how'd that come about?
Yeah, my friend recommended it. She, I think what sold me on it, honestly, was because I started this amid the pandemic. She told me that it was all through Zoom. So I was like, I can do it in Zoom. Sold. Like, I'm doing it. And it's like a spa day, like in my office, and it's awesome.
Is it like a guided music coming in too?
Yeah,
and
there's music, my hypnotherapist talking to me, and then when she records each session, and then when she asks me to explain to her like what I'm visualizing, like the fences, she'll pause the recording, and then I explain to her, and then she'll unpause, and then she'll talk me through it. So like, I'll describe the open fences, and then she'll unpause and then say, okay, now these open fences, like, how do you open the gate? Or I don't know, something kind of like that. And we also did one on sleep. I think I have a generic version of that recording, and I'll send it to you after this.
Like, and anyone could use that?
Yeah.
To go to sleep?
Yeah. And it's like, the visualization that she talks about is, like imagining you're in this room with a closed door, and you know how the doors have cracks and you can see light through it, to visualize painting over the light with a black paint and to help you fall asleep.
And is that's something you use on like a daily basis, or is that just like if you have trouble falling asleep?
When I have trouble falling asleep, I think the way I did it was, I think I used that like every night for like a week to kind of get into that mindset of it. And then from there, I haven't needed it as much, but if I have a sleepless night, I'll try to use it.
It's fascinating. It's like, there's so many different sleep hacks and sleep ways to get better sleep. And you posted recently about your incredible night of sleep. And I'm curious, like, what other things you do to sleep better?
Yeah, so definitely no alcohol past 6 p.m. I don't drink that much these days, but like, I mean, sometimes I'll have a glass of wine, rather I'll make myself a cocktail, but I do that for like truly happy hour, like 5 to 6 p.m. And then giving myself that time frame makes it such that I can't have anymore. So that helps a lot with the sleep. Ideally, I'll have a good workout in the morning. Sometimes, you can't, right? Other things I do is I try to avoid any kind of screen time, at least like an hour or so before bed. I'll say that the night that I had really, really good sleep was a night that I happened to watch TV. So
really?
Yeah. So like,
interesting.
Yeah, I watched.
What show was it?
It was, of all shows, it was The Wire. So not exactly the most relaxing.
Isn't that like a drama?
Yeah, it's like a police like crime drama. It's a good show, and I'm watching it for the first time. But I think the nuance there, it's not that, oh, TV helps you sleep, right? I think it was, I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. So I think it was just the act of unwinding and thinking and not thinking about the day-to-day stuff and just being in a separate little world for a little while. That helped me unwind. And then watch that like 2 hours before bedtime. So it wasn't like TV and then immediate sleep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, and then I'm a nighttime showerer. So shower, skincare routine at night. That establishes a routine and like, helps me feel ready for bed.
Yeah. How do you think about the boundaries of work and play? It's like when you're working with social media, when you're working with content, it's like you could think about playing on social media. You could think about it as like, oh, this is just fun for me to be on Twitter. And so you could be doing it early or late. Like, how do you think about like setting those boundaries?
It's hard. And it's hard because I'm, for the first time in a very long time, I'm extremely happy with my day job. And by that, I mean, I've had a lot of amazing jobs, but I mean, for this is where I'm uniquely happy with SparkToro is the product that we create is, it's reflective of my overall philosophy of marketing. So it feels like me. So the work that I'm doing day to day, it doesn't always feel like work. Like sure, like sometimes it's tough to respond to, because it's only the three of us at this company. So we reply personally to every support email. So, you know, if it's like a really like specific email about how does this thing work, like, is that super fun for me? Not really, I guess. But broadly speaking, it is fun because it's reflective of my core values, how I would do the work, and it makes me happy. So I think where it can be hard to kind of separate work and play is that work often feels like play for me. So like I'm excited to like get up in the morning and like get to my computer and like write out some blog posts. Like that's fun for me. But I do think it's important to identify some moments of play that can't be work. So like things like cooking pretty often, that's really important for me. Even if I'm having a hard or long day where, I mean, sometimes, yeah, the last thing I want to do is cook a meal for 30 minutes sometimes, right? But most of the time I like it because it is a non-screen thing. It's a physical thing that I can do that with my hands, and like I can taste it, I can eat it, right? Like having moments like that is really important for me because it has nothing to do with my work or what I do at the computer, we'll say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. On the topic of food, I guess, and content, you named the newsletter and the show The Menu. I'm curious what the reasoning is for them to be the same name.
They're the same name, I think, because I was just too lazy to have a new name. I think I was just like, it's one thing.
Yeah.
I think I'm sure a lot of people would push back on this, but my little hypothesis is nobody really cares what the name is of things because they know it's my show. So I think if I called it, I can call it the Amanda Show. I don't think it would matter, right? I think they'd be like, hey, it's your show, like whatever it is. So anyway, my hypothesis is that it doesn't really matter. But also it makes sense because the menu means a list of options. And like my newsletter covers different topics. It's mostly marketing stuff, but it's kind of different stuff. There's always a recipe. That's pretty random. And then the guests for my show, like, I don't have a goal for it to be only marketing people. Like, I want my show, honestly, to just have people who want to be on the show. Like people who want to be on, who want to talk to me and have fun and have something interesting to say. Like, that's all I really care about. Like you.
Totally. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And so, like, what does success look like for the menu a year from now? The show.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question, especially because it's on YouTube. And YouTube is really, really hard to grow. So one goal I have is to take the audio from it and turn it into a podcast. My hope is that like once I have done several episodes, that then I can work on the podcast and launch that with like 4 to 5 episodes in one go, and then do that ongoing. So there's that. I think, and so knowing that YouTube is really hard to grow and it requires a lot of work, it requires a lot of content, I don't think I'm going to do that in that it's a lot of stuff. I don't have time for it. So I think what success might look like is podcast listens, like just our people listening to it, hopefully a couple hundred downloads per episode. And then I do think that I do hope that my YouTube subscriber base grows, right? When I say that it's really hard to grow, it's not that. What I'm saying is I don't have a goal of getting to like 20,000 by the end of the year. It's more like maybe next year I hope to have like 1,000 subscribers. Like I hope that it does grow, but not looking for explosive numbers here.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It feels like you're doing so much, newsletter, podcast, YouTube show, tweets. Do you ever feel any overwhelm, or it's just at this moment all feels like play to you?
It's both. Like it genuinely is all a lot of fun, and I'm excited about all of it, and I feel super lucky to be able to do all this. But it is feeling like too much. Like I am like starting to feel like, oh shoot, I've bitten off more than I can chew. I've started saying no to some things. Like for podcasts, for instance, I said yes to every single one last year. Like anyone who would have me, I'd be like, yes, let's do it. But this year I'm trying to be more intentional about it. So, and also it's for the benefit of the podcast host or show host, whatever the thing is, because it could be a YouTube show. I don't know. I think it's a good use of everyone's time if everyone is excited about the interview. Like if everyone's happy to do it, if everyone feels like there's something to benefit from, whether the benefit is learning something or the benefit is, downloads, right? Like things like that. Like I'm being more intentional about the things that I say yes to in hopes that I can focus on the things that I'm currently doing, or in hopes that I'm freeing up some of my time to create more time for serendipitous moments.
Seems like a pretty good way to approach it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Seems like it to me. Before I let you go, I got to ask about advice to, let's say, a content creator who's just getting out of college, who knows that they want to pursue some sort of career in content creation, but they're looking for some wisdom from Amanda. What do you tell them?
I would say to choose whichever platform you really want to be on because you're already interested in it. And you happen to already like the platform. So whether it is Twitter, whether it's LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever you like, go where you want to be. So that's the first one. And the second one that I will say very carefully is to treat it or to look at it kind of like a resume. And when I say that, I don't mean, oh, you can only talk about work. No, because I don't think that's what people do in a resume. Like if I think about my own resume, I have my interests listed. I have a couple of random things. You have your
blood pressure on there.
I have my blood pressure. And that was just a goofy thing, right? Like, yeah, and that's part of it, right? Like, I don't care. I think it's funny. And actually that's a great example because if anybody sees that and they don't like it or they're offended by it, that's fine. But then that means that we're not a good fit for each other. And that's exactly what I mean by treating it like a resume. It's, yeah, put out what feels right to you, what is reflective of you. And if someone doesn't like it, like if someone doesn't think my blood pressure joke is funny and they're just like, that's inappropriate, that's fair. They can think that. But it also means that we're probably not going to vibe with each other. And that's fine too. So I think when people hear about treating their social media like their resume, it sounds scary because it sounds like employers are looking at you. The thing I would say is they're looking at you anyway. Like if you apply for a job, they're going to Google you. So there's that. And I think if you are if you are a decent person and you're pure of heart and you're posting what feels right to you, like what you're interested in, what you're good at, I think any employer who would like you and who you would like also would appreciate that content. And that was how I got my current job. Like, that was how I met Rand Fishkin, the, founder of SparkToro, which was, I was posting more of my content marketing learnings on Twitter, but then I was also just being myself and posting goofy things here and there. And he thought that was funny. And so he saw me as like, oh, she's a normal person who has a lot of marketing experience. That's cool. So that's what I would say as my advice.
I think that's incredible advice. And if someone wants to follow you, it's Amanda Nat on Twitter and amandanat.com. Where should people connect with you though? Is Twitter the best place? Yeah,
Twitter's the best place. Amanda Nat on Twitter. And then if you have time, consider checking out my YouTube show. It is on Fridays at 11 a.m. Pacific time.
And it's just starting out right now. So I can't wait to see how it develops over the coming weeks, months, and years.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Danny.
Amanda.
Thank you so much, Danny. This was so fun.